Absolutely. Get my screen. All right, well, thank you everyone, those of you that are here this evening, as well as those of you that might be watching this after the fact. As mentioned, my name is Hannah Mudrick, and I'm an assistant professor of human development and family studies at Penn State Harrisburg. And I'm super excited to be here to talk about this topic, as well as to hear some of the things that you guys are thinking and feeling and wondering about in relation to this specific topic. I feel like it's very timely and is something that we can all benefit from. So a little bit about my teaching and research, it really focuses primarily on this exact topic of how do we promote and encourage young children to reach that optimal development? How do we support them? How do we put those all those resources and those opportunities in place? However, as a mother trying to raise 2 young children of my own while working full-time in the midst of a pandemic, I know how daunting this task can feel. And so I encourage those of you that might be joining in later to continue to reach out to me. I will share my contact information after this with questions or thoughts. I would love to continue the conversation as we go on. So what I want to do first, however, is I want to first express my appreciation to the Dauphin County Library System for putting this programming together and offering me this opportunity to share with you a little bit of the things that I've been thinking about. So specifically, Emily and Ashley and Hannah, who I've been meeting with, I really want to thank you for that opportunity. But probably more importantly, I want to take a moment to appreciate all of you that are listening, that will be hearing this, that are attending this programming, because really you are the most important thing in your child's life. Your words, your love, your play, the engagement that you engage with your young children in, all of those connections are building what matters most when it comes to supporting young children. So when we talk about how do we support the social and emotional learning of young children, a lot of this is going to come back to you. So we don't often acknowledge how hard it is to raise or to be helping to raise. So we're talking about grandparents and teachers and librarians and everyone else that's involved in this, how hard that is, especially during some of these trying times. So I just want you all to feel very proud of yourself. So the attention that you're giving children, the time and the resources. And we know that you're playing multiple different roles. You are cooks, you are teachers, you are parents, chauffeurs, and entertainers, therapists, and much, much more. So I just want to say thank you, and I hope that you all appreciate and are proud of yourself for everything that you are doing for young children. So this really brings me to the crux of what I'm hoping to talk about today, which is that many of us are already aware those first few years of young children's lives, so between the ages of birth and 5, children are learning more than they do at any other developmental part of their life. And so what our job is to really make sure that we set those children up to be successful. And the way that we can do that is really by supporting them, providing those resources and those opportunities. So the way that I really like to think about this is about building a frame or a foundation. And so when we think about that, we're thinking about building that strong foundation for everything else that's going to happen afterwards. So similar to the house, if it's not strong, if it's not supported, if there's weak joints in it, that house is going to start to crumble, it's going to start to break down, and eventually might collapse. So what we really need to do is work together to support families and communities in building strong foundations for young children. So it really does take a village to raise a young child. And so I want us all to think about what role we might be able to play in that. However, as you are also well aware of, children don't come with blueprints or instruction manuals as much as we wish that they probably did. And every child is different. Every child's needs are going to be different. And so some of the things I'm going to talk about this evening, you may have to think about, is this something that I can do with my child, or does my child have a different need? And so we all know our own children best. So I just want you to think about what we're going to talk about tonight as providing the tools that you might be able to include in your toolbox as you start to navigate, how do I help care for these young children? So what are children doing during those first 5 years of their life? Why is it so important that we are focused on this? Why today did we decide to focus on those social and emotional skills? Well, primarily during these first couple of years, children are working really, really hard. They're working really hard to learn about the people, places, and things around them. And so we never are really able to come up with a comprehensive list of all the things that children are learning during these first 5 years, because it would just be going on and on and on and on. It would be quite the long list. But in addition to some of those physical and cognitive skills that I'm not going to focus as closely on today, so things about children learning, how do I move my body, and how do I pay attention, and how do I represent my experiences, how do I problem solve, how do I organize all of this information that I'm bringing in, what do I do with this, how do I learn about right and wrong. Children are working on a lot of other skills, the social and emotional skills. So what some of these skills are during those first 5 years, the things that really make this so important for us to be paying attention and thinking about ways that we can support families and communities in fostering young children's development, are some of these things I have listed here. So when we think about children, some of the things that they are contemplating is, who am I? And how do I feel about that? So we call that self-awareness and self-esteem, and it is something that we see continuing to develop across those first couple years of life. Children are also wondering, how do my thoughts impact my behavior? And why is my perspective a little bit different maybe from others? Why do I like some things but other people don't like those same things? And how do we maybe come to an agreement about that? We call those theory of mind skills. And that also, we see great leaps and bounds in children's ability to sort of step out of their own shoes and to step into someone else's shoes happening in those preschool years. Children are learning things like, what are the emotions I feel, and how do I cope with them? How do I regulate my emotions and my behavior? Probably one of the core things that children are learning, especially during infancy and toddlerhood, is who can I trust to care for me and encourage me and foster this love of learning? And so I'll come back to that again, because it really is probably one of the most important things that we want to emphasize and focus on. Children are also learning, how do I self-assert? How do I exert control over my life? And so if you've ever been around toddlers, for example, you know that they like to do things on their own. They like to do things for themselves. And so that's actually a great thing for them to want to do. And we want to provide those opportunities for young children to be autonomous. Children are also learning, how do I communicate my needs and my wants? So when we think about infants and toddlers, we're thinking about crying and pointing and whining. But as children develop those communication skills across those first couple years of life, they're also learning, how do I put these words together? How do I have to adapt my language to different scenarios? When I'm talking to a neighbor versus when I'm talking to mom, I might have to use different communication skills and competencies. Children are also learning, how do I form relationships with others? And this is something that we really are worried about during the pandemic, is the idea that young children aren't having those same opportunities to connect with peers and teachers and extended family members, grandparents, etc. But I'm going to cut to the chase and say that that's okay. And we're going to talk a little bit about why that's okay, that we don't have all of those same opportunities that we did pre-pandemic. And the last thing is, children are really learning about, how do I fit into my family? How do I fit into my community? Where and how do I belong? That's something that we really want to foster in children. We really want to encourage them to find their place, to find those things that they're good at, and to really try to strengthen those skills for children. We want them to have that sense of belonging. So once again, I'll talk a little bit more about that. So overall, all of these social and emotional skills are going to set children up to develop successfully, just as much as, and I would probably argue even more so than, the academic and cognitive skills that we hear a lot about when it comes to school readiness and some of the other conversations that are going on potentially in some of your communities. So how exactly, do we do this in an environment, in the context that is surrounding us at this current moment? So we know that the world does not stop spinning around young children. Children are working on building these skills and competencies despite or even in the midst of these current circumstances. We know that development can be negatively impacted as well as positively impacted by that socio-cultural context that we're in. And right now, that context includes a global pandemic. We're well aware of that. But what that has resulted in is the fact that schools have been closed, childcare centers have been closed. Children have been asked to shift the way that they learn. So maybe they've moved to homeschooling. Maybe now mom and dad are trying to teach them. They've been asked to engage in school over Zoom. It is something that is not familiar to them, and we are asking them to adapt and be flexible and to do it pretty quickly. Even children then are embedded in some of these hybrid modes or even are in residence in schools and childcare centers. We know that the circumstances around that have changed as well. We know that the pandemic has contributed to an inability to connect with families and friends in ways that were probably customary to all of us and to children. And so this is all a new venture for them. Given all of those health concerns, we want to make sure that we are prioritizing that, but we're also thinking about what some of the implications of these things are. We know that the pandemic has also resulted in instability in the form of caregiver work, in terms of housing, in terms of access to food. And those are some of those basic needs, some of the pivotal things, that foundation that we need to have in order to engage in any sort of learning. So that is what we really need to focus on. And then, as I'll talk about in just a few minutes, then we can go on and think about some of those other needs that we can meet for young children. We know that the pandemic has also contributed to changing household routines. So this can include who is now present in the home and who is not or no longer present in the home. So changes in caregivers. We know that adults are having to work from home. They're having to balance home and school and work responsibilities. And that has shifted the way that children sort of view their world. We also know that it's not just a pandemic, that there are also lots of other things that are going on in our communities. So violence stemming from political and racial tensions around the world, around our country, but even probably more importantly for many children right in the community in which they are growing up in, that they are hoping to grow and to develop and to learn those skills so that they can be successful as they transition into later stages of their development. So all of these circumstances do impact some families and children more than others. So what our ultimate goal is really to think about ensuring that all children have those resources and those supports to develop successfully. And when I say successfully, what I really mean is that they are happy, they are healthy, they are safe, and then they are loved. Those are the most important things we want to ensure for young children. So we know that these circumstances and all of these changes that we have been asked to make really are creating stress, anxiety, and frustration for many families and children alike. So the idea that at this time, parents, caregivers, grandparents, teachers, everyone is feeling this heightened sense of expectation, thinking that I need to do it all. And so I have used this, I know it says 2019, but I think it's very much applicable to the things that are going on today in 2021. So the idea, we have these heightened expectations that I need to make sure I'm meeting my child's academic, emotional, psychological, mental, spiritual, physical, nutritional, social needs, while also not overstimulating and understimulating and all of these other things. So what that leads to is this sense of feeling overwhelmed, that parents and caregivers and everyone else that is a pivotal part of young children's lives are feeling, I just can't do it all. But yet they're also feeling anxious that they need to find a way to do it all, that they're being asked to do all of these things. So couple that with the loss of social support, and caregivers are really left feeling that there's no one there to help. So children oftentimes feel many of these same things too, that they demonstrate them in slightly different ways than we do as adults. So some of their stress, their anxiety, their frustration comes out in fear, comes out in irritability, aggression, overly clinging, thinking about difficulty sleeping and eating, maybe some behavioral regressions. And so Yet we know that everyone is going to respond differently to these circumstances. And some of those reasons go back to temperamental differences. We all are genetically a little bit different. We all are in environments that are slightly different. So families are dealing with different challenges and different struggles. And we know that some, as I mentioned, that some families are extremely impacted by the pandemic and some of these other factors that I had mentioned. But every person is going to experience different emotions, and they're going to demonstrate those different emotions in different ways and through different behaviors. And therefore, we need to think about what those needs are and how do we adapt and individualize for families and children. But the great news is that children can be very resilient when they have a loving relationship. So that relationship comes back as really being the crux of how do we support children's social and emotional health and development. So in general, children are able to adapt more easily than adults to lots of different things. And that's due in part to some of their still developing brains and the idea of neuroplasticity. But yet we also see that children view the world differently than we do as adults. So what we see as challenges, children oftentimes appreciate as benefits. So I know personally, for example, when the pandemic first hit, my own children reported that they were thankful that we got to spend more time together. And so this has been studied and researched, the idea that children are actually really excited to spend time with their favorite people, which just so happens to be you. So we know that there are other theoretical models and research that have studied sort of children's resiliency and how do we foster that. But one of the things I wanted to mention is this idea that comes from family stress theory. And it's this idea that we all experience challenges, but not everyone, those challenges don't result in a crisis for all families. So what sets some families apart, or some children or some adults apart? And what it is that it does not result in a crisis if you feel you have the resources and the confidence in order to overcome them. So we as adults need to maintain that sense of positivity as best as we can, to be able to pass that along to children, to find the good in these experiences, to find that light at the end of the tunnel, so that we really can think about, this is not going to last forever, that we are going to get through this, and we're going to get through this together. So what can we do in order to support young children's social and emotional development? Again, the good news is that you don't really have to do anything fancy or anything special. Building strong relationships with young children is really the crux of supporting their development. So I found this quote, what really matters, what's really at the heart of connection is the idea of the energy you are bringing to that moment with your child. So being present, being responsive, being there for your children is really what is the most important thing. But I do have some suggestions of what we can do in order to support young children's social and emotional development. And the first suggestion is to ensure that you fill your cup first. And what I mean by that is you need to make sure that you are in check with your own social, emotional, and mental health needs, and that you are able to take care of those, because you are not going to be able to help children grow and develop and support them if you are not ready to do that. So same thing, I know many of us haven't been on an airplane in a very long time, and maybe not are going to be on one in the short term, but the idea that they say, put on your oxygen mask first before you help those around you. That's what we need to think about. We need to make sure that we have that oxygen mask on, that we are ready to engage in this with young children. So ways that you can do that, filling your cup, is by acknowledging your own emotions. So it's okay to feel anxious. It's okay to feel stressed. It's okay to feel sad. It's okay to feel angry. Emotions are okay. But what you need to do is think about the best ways for you in order to deal with those emotions, to cope, to regulate, to be able to work through some of those. So in some cases, that might be to set aside time for your own self-care, which I know I'm talking to those of you that may be listening to this afterwards, to a group of parents that say, there's no time in the day, there's no time to do that. But really, you need to make sure that you are intentional, that you are setting aside that time, and that you're modeling that for young children, letting them know it's okay to need a break. So you are teaching them in that moment of saying, I need to step away. I need to go take a breath. I need to go take a walk around the neighborhood, saying that I have emotions and here's what I do in order to regulate those emotions. And I will be better equipped to engage in our relationship with you and with each other when I am in a better place personally. So also another strategy to fill your cup is trying to find your community. So even though we might not be able to reach out and physically hug each other, we all want to feel that warm embrace. We want to be part of that group. We want to be engaged with others. So your community might be your partner. It might be your sibling or a parent or another family member. It could be a parent of a child in your child's classroom. It could be a neighbor. It could be a worship leader. It could be an online community, whoever it happens to be. And the more the merrier here is find that community. Use your community to discuss both the things that are going really well, the good, your successes, but then also there to play off of each other when you do have those challenges, to offer suggestions to each other, to be there, that empathic listening ear to say, yeah, this is really hard. I know that myself and some of my colleagues and friends at Penn State have done that this semester, actually across the entire year. We really set aside that time. And so we formed this moms group specifically to talk about navigating, trying to teach and to raise young children and do this during pandemic when you're working full time, just to be there. That is helping us find that community. My second suggestion is going to be to make sure that you take care of those children's physical health and safety needs first before anything else. So some of you may be familiar, maybe a high school psychology class or a college course that you took, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And what that really says is we need to take care of those basic needs first. So families and children need food to eat, a place to live, that shelter, all of those basic needs before we can focus on that next step. Children need to know that they are safe. That's really important in this time where everyone's talking about how the world happens to be unsafe for lots of different reasons. But children also need to know that they are loved and supported. So children learn best when they can trust that they have caregivers who will encourage them to both explore their world, but also provide that comfort and that protection to them. So their most important relationship is you. So don't worry too much that some of their other relationships look a little bit different, as I mentioned, that maybe you're not having as many play dates as you used to. Maybe you're not able to see, or they are not able to see their grandparents as frequently or in person. But that's okay because, as I said, it really is those relationships that they do have. And that really is the basis of secure attachment with caregivers. You are providing that model for how they are going to view all future relationships. It's a big responsibility, but I know that all of you can do that. We want them to hear us saying with our words, with our embrace, with all of our actions, that I'm here if you need me. And then we can start to focus on some of those other things. And one of those is going to be children's emotional needs. So talk to them about emotions and what they are feeling. So just as you are feeling sad and anxious and stressed and frustrated, children are feeling those things too. Be patient with them and reassure them that it's okay and I'm going to help you through this. So what we know is that children, infants and toddlers, we have to regulate those emotions for them. But as children get older, we can start to do a little bit of co-regulation. We're helping them along the way. And eventually we want to get them to that place where they know how to self-regulate when it comes to those emotions and those behaviors. So help them learn those strategies. What can they do in order to regulate those feelings? Is it taking a run around the block? Is it jumping up and down on a pillow? Is it curling up in your lap and reading a story? Whatever is going to work well for you and that child is what you should be focused on. But you also need to make sure that you are demonstrating empathy and you're talking about how you're feeling as well. So children like to hear, yeah, I'm a little bit upset too that we didn't get to go to that party. And I know it's really sad. It makes me really sad that we can't go on our vacation that we planned. Sharing in those emotions with young children is once again validating that it's okay to have those emotions and helping them learn about what we do with those things. Children are always, and I repeat, always watching, listening, and learning from the people around them. So children will do as you do. So the cliche saying is children, do as I say, not as I do. It doesn't really work with young children. So what you want to do is you want to be able to model them and guide them in developing that emotional competence. So in this this time of our lives in which many of us are overstressed, overburdened, and don't have time, maybe you want to implement a family routine of doing meditation or breathing exercises or some practice in terms of mindfulness, because that's not only going to benefit you and your children, but it can benefit your entire family. It's also important to establish routines. So children thrive on knowing what to expect. So consider how best to provide that structure, that predictability, that security for children. We all know there's a new normal. And so I'm not going to use that phrase, but the idea that you need to create new ways of doing, whatever that is in your family, whatever works for your family, and to communicate with each other when it's not working. So if you have a partner or multiple partners in caregiving, talk with them. This what we're doing right now is not working. And bring children into that conversation as well. So let them share their thoughts and their feelings and their ideas in terms of how we can make things work better. So whether that happens to be negotiating, work and family, whether it happens to be negotiating sort of drop off to school, bedtime routines, whatever it is that seems to be a challenge in your family, open up that communication and talk it out. And some of the things that we know is that children will act out because of those strong emotions that we have. So it's also important that you do continue to set those limits. So once again, consistency and making sure they have some predictability. If you say no to something, that children know that there are going to be consequences to those actions. You love them regardless, but yet they need to be thinking about what is going to happen in certain circumstances. There are these consequences. And when possible, you're going to I encourage you to invite children into those conversations as well. Invite them to make those choices. It allows them to feel confidence that they can be autonomous, that they do have some control over their life. So for example, you might say, okay, I have a meeting, but here are your choices. You can choose to read a book, or you can play with these Legos right next to me while I'm on my call. So you set those expectations, but yet you're giving children that choice in terms of making a decision for themselves in terms of what they're going to do. One other thing that I want to encourage us all to think about is that it's important to challenge children and not overly challenge them. So if anyone is familiar with Lev Vygotsky, he's a developmental theorist, and he talks about this principle or this concept of the zone of proximal development. But what that basically means is that you provide children opportunities in which they can continue to grow, that they can learn new things. But the way that we have to do that is we need to provide them tasks that are neither too easy, that they already know, that they already possess that knowledge and that competency, but also are not too hard for them. So it's okay, and I know sometimes this seems strange, it's okay for children to feel frustration. Rather than trying to fix the problem for children, really supporting them in learning how to cope or how to solve that problem is really going to be beneficial to them. So I work with college students, and so if we probably thought about these things when children were younger, we maybe wouldn't see as many challenges around emotion and behavioral regulation. This idea that I am confident, I have the competencies in order to solve my own problems because I have been given opportunities in order to practice that throughout my life. You are your child's first teacher, and so they are going to learn a lot, even within the confines of your home, and even without much effort on your part when we give them those opportunities. So if you have children that have siblings or cousins or other neighborhood children that they are engaging with, give them opportunities to build some of those skills. So sharing and turn taking, conflict resolution. Maybe you don't see too many other children. And so some of those skills that you might be able to work on to challenge them are self-help skills. So now's a great time to say, you know what? I want you to try to get dressed yourself. I want you to try to brush your teeth. I want you to try to get your own water while I'm in this meeting. This helps to build skills in terms of communication, in terms of problem solving. And so one of the big things that we know is that development, these different developmental domains, so physical development, cognitive development, social and emotional development, when you build skills in one area, it really does have advantages for the others. So the next thing is that I really want to emphasize is that we seek help, and this is both on the part of yourselves as well as on behalf of your children when it is needed. So things like depression and anxiety do impede children's development. So we want those to seek out professionals, whether it be counselors or pediatricians or even your child's teacher, when there are some things that are concerning to you or you are concerned about, but then to also recognize that when others raise those concerns about you, maybe we can take advantage of that as one of those cues that, you know what, I think I would feel better getting this checked out. I think I would feel better talking to someone about this. So social distance doesn't mean social isolation. It's okay to ask for help, and I know sometimes it's really hard for us to do that, and it's okay to receive it. So when someone is offering you help, it's okay to say, yes, I really could use a little bit of help right now. And the last thing that I want to mention here is the idea that if you have anything else to give, anything left, time, energy, is to really advocate. And this might be things such as higher quality childcare, financial support for families, better leave policies, appropriate medical care, anything that you are passionate about. Speak out, because when we don't speak out about these things, we don't see change. So you are the change that we hope to see in the world, and you are setting up the future for your children. So some more practical things when it comes to, and I'm trying to be mindful of time here as well, is supporting children's social and emotional development at home. One of the first things that I would want you to recognize is to remember we want to set developmentally appropriate expectations. For example, your 1-year-old only has an attention span of about 1 to 3 minutes, and even your 4-year-old can only focus for about 10. So therefore, we can't expect children to be able to entertain themselves for an hour conference call. Similarly, it's developmentally appropriate for 1-year-olds to not have or need play dates. So your infant and toddler can benefit from social interactions, absolutely, outside of the home, but what they really need is only you. In most cases, they will not be negatively impacted long-term by not being able to see those peers and those teachers or other family members. We want them, and we're going to provide some opportunities, and if at all possible, to do that. But know that we are not seeing that there are these big detrimental impacts of the pandemic for especially our youngest learners when it comes to that social distancing. It's also important to emphasize quality time with children means much more than the quantity of time that you spend. So when you are with children, try to give them your full positive attention. So I really want to emphasize that positive attention, focus on the things that they are doing well. Wow, I'm really proud of you. You waited until I got off the phone to answer or to ask me that question. I really appreciate that. You know what? You are working really hard on that drawing, and you did you worked on it really hard while I was putting your sister down for a nap. Recognizing those things that your child is doing well tells them that they should continue to do those things, as opposed to focusing on the things that you don't want them to be doing. So we also want to think about using this quality time to be responsive to children. So when children give you their attention, we want to reciprocate that with ours. So putting down smartphones, closing up your laptop, saying the dishes can wait for a little bit of time, and focusing your attention on that interaction you are having with young children. But yeah, we all know things need to get done. So when things do need to get done, laundry, dishes, packing up lunches for the next day, whatever it happens to be, invite your children into that in whatever way is possible, and try to make it as fun as you can. So challenge your children, for example, to see who can clean up the fastest, or who can throw their laundry into the hamper with the most accuracy, who can get the most points there. The idea of involving children in the cooking that you need to do, or filling up the water bottles for the day, or helping to change the baby's diaper. The more that you invite them into that, once again, it shows them that they have these competencies and that you value them, that you want them to help out, and they get to contribute to your community, your family. We also want to present things as opportunities to do something different or learn something new. So encourage children to form different or maybe stronger relationships with siblings and family members. And I know it looks a little bit different, but maybe you can phrase it instead of like, yes, I know we're doing virtual learning, but isn't it so nice now that you and your brother can go to school together in the same room? So really focusing on the things that your children get to do by all of these different changes that are going on in the world, and invite children to teach you. So you are not only the teacher of them, but they can share a lot of great things with you too. So challenge them. Can you find a way to teach grandma and grandpa how to learn Zoom? Or how do you think you could play this game with a peer when you guys aren't in the same house? Challenge them to be creative, to play games with other children in the neighborhood, with their peers in a different way than maybe they have previously. So how could you play a game of tag without touching? Children are actually really amazing problem solvers, and some of the things that they come up with are, they would blow your mind, or they do blow your mind. So give them those opportunities. The next thing that I would emphasize is really to prioritize relationships, but know that you can use technology in order to support those. So again, social distance doesn't mean social isolation. Giving children opportunities to feel connected is going to be really important. So we don't want to cut off all of those relationships, but we just have to do them in a little bit different way. So, for example, grandparents might be able to read to children over Zoom or FaceTime. People can still play peekaboo over FaceTime. Anyone can share in music together, listening to the same station, over the phone even. Have a dance party, this idea that we can use technology in order to support those connections that we have with others. And children can actually still see their peers. They can do this virtually, such as at library sessions or virtual play dates, but also know that we can get pretty creative in terms of setting up safe in-person play dates. So ensuring children are masked and ensuring that they are washing their hands before and after, that they at all possible are not sharing the same materials. So you have two sets of materials. Children are actually really good, and we as adults have more trouble thinking about, oh, that's not going to work. Then children say, oh, this is cool. We're going to do this in a different way. So giving them those opportunities to still engage in those relationships is going to be important. It's also important for children to stay busy. We all know that when children are not busy, when they get bored is when some of those challenges come up. But that doesn't mean that you have to entertain them. So one of the biggest things that I would encourage you to do is try to engage your children in imaginative play. So providing opportunities. So our homes are actually full of lots of great open-ended materials. So this can be anything from the couch cushions to old socks and straws and tape. I know my son, who's 5, comes up with all different types of things, and he puts them together and he creates things. So providing that opportunity to just use these open-ended materials to engage in this imaginative play, not only is fostering communication and creativity and understanding how do we engage in some of these social relationships in a different way, but also research actually indicates that children that have imaginary friends develop better social skills. So it indicates that we don't actually need a whole bunch of other children in order to play with, that children are pretty good in some cases of being able to engage in that imaginative play even by themselves. So bringing in stuffed animals and maybe setting up a tablet if that's possible to show someone else some of the things you're doing. So once again, we're going to get a little bit creative here. And I know it's really hard to completely eliminate screen time, and I wholeheartedly support parents also using this to take that needed break. But what we can do is we can choose better screen time opportunities and activities. So those that include movement, get your children up and moving and dancing and doing different exercises, or maybe those that embed social stories in it. So talking about the things that are going on in the world in developmentally appropriate ways, talking about emotions, talking about the things that they're interested in. Library activities, virtual activities are another great way that we can incorporate screen time activities, but are actually in a very developmentally appropriate and beneficial way. I know that, for example, Khan Academy Kids is a good app that I have personally used that has a lot of great activities that are focusing on not just academic cognitive skills, but also some of those social and emotional skills as well. So we know that we can still create these positive experiences. And if at all possible, use that technology with your children. That's the best way for them, is to have you sitting there next to them while they're viewing something on TV or on some sort of device. The biggest thing that we do across the entire developmental across all our entire lives, I would say, one of the most important things is that we continue to read, sing, and tell stories. And these are things you don't need any materials in order to do. So this can't be emphasized enough. These things build language skills and literacy skills, emotional intelligence, bonding, and we know that they actually reduce our stress. So once again, doing these things alongside children, encouraging them to learn how to do some of these things independently as they're getting older, is going to be beneficial long-term for children. But other ways are focusing on, as I mentioned, some of those cross-domain advantages is just overall health. So focusing on getting children outside and moving their bodies is going to contribute to them feeling a little bit better, to easing some of that anxiety, to getting out some of that energy. And we know that you can foster social engagement through activities like hiding rocks that you happen to paint around the neighborhood and watching to see people finding them, or posting it on social media. I found your rock over here. We can see that they travel very far. We know that you can still engage safely with neighbors. So you can play with them, you can talk to them. You might be able to write letters or make crafts for those at a community center around you, or maybe drop them off at a family member or a friend's house, leave it on their doorstep. This idea that we can still be engaging in these social things while we're getting out and doing things outside of our home. And I know the weather sometimes impedes that, but we are looking forward to spring, I know. And then it's also helpful for children to be able to reflect on prior social experiences. So children love to look at photos, they love to watch videos, and many of us carry around that personal camera in our pockets these days. So encouraging children to reflect back and talk about how it felt and those good times that they had, and also look forward to those future things. So planning upcoming trips and thinking about the next time they're going to be able to see their cousins, and maybe going on those virtual trips to places that they have been or that they haven't been before. All of these things, once again, are using all of these sort of resources that many of us have right here in front of us. It's not asking us to go out of our way to do something that we are not equipped to do. And the last thing I would say is remain hopeful. That positive outlook that life will not continue like this forever is really important. And it's going to contribute to caregivers' sort of outlook and perspective on life and the way that they are feeling, but also it's going to trickle down to children as well. And so I'd really like to end this sort of where I started, recognizing all of you for doing the best that you possibly could to support children. We know that there are no perfect parents. There's no perfect grandparent. There's no perfect teacher. There's no perfect sibling. There's no perfect child. And we also know that there is no one way to parent. So I like this quote too. It's okay to say, I need a break. I need to do something else. I am going to spend time away from you, my lovely child, my lovely baby, but it's okay too to sit on that couch and snuggle that baby. So the idea that everyone is going into this and finding what works best for them is okay. And we should value that we have those opportunities. You do what you need to do in order to make it through, and we're going to be here in order to support you through that. So there are millions of different ways that you can that you already are doing to support children's social and emotional development during the pandemic. So doing the best might look a little bit different each day, and that's okay too. You're gonna have good days, you're gonna have bad days, your children are gonna have good days and bad days. But this idea that we power through, that we continue on, that we are here to support each other is really important. So what I would say is what really matters, where it starts, when we think about fostering children's development, their social emotional learning, is that you have that love, that laughter, and probably a really good internet connection. So the more that we invest today, the better we are going to see that return for our tomorrow, for yourselves, for your family, for the future family of your children and your grandchildren. So there are also a number of other resources that I would encourage caregivers to look into, because they have a lot of great resources for caregivers. Some of them are offering resources and tips and parenting, blogs and different things of that nature. So these are a few of them, and I will happily share links to any of these as well. But I know with the posting of this recording, you might be able to look up some of these, and these are pretty good. And I just want to end by saying thank you, and I would love to continue the conversation either tonight or as we go forward. My contact information is here, and I would love to hear from anyone. Feel free to call, feel free to email. I'm really looking forward to really creating this community in which we are really serving all of children's needs, but especially those social and emotional needs. And as I said, it really does take a village to raise a child. So thank you again. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer any of those.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mudrick. That was a wonderful presentation. Let me turn my video on. That was a wonderful presentation. I really enjoyed that. Anne-Marie, Debbie, do y'all have any questions?
Yeah, it was a lot of excellent information. We've been building programs and building a lot of the routine and that into the programs that we're presenting through Zoom. I think one area where we probably would like to build a little bit more in is helping to build community with the people that are attending. I know we're meeting with them for 20 or 30 minutes once a week. And a big part of that is the program, the songs, the books, and everything else that we're presenting. But I think from surveys, I think people are really craving the community, the connection. So I didn't know if you had any recommendations when you're working in a Zoom room, how to help build community among the people there visiting.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit harder. It's different working in a virtual sense than you would be face-to-face. And it's especially hard when you're trying to balance everything else that's going on. We are inviting people into our homes when we are Zooming now, and it's not something that we necessarily have ever done previously. So I think just in terms of engaging is, once again, providing those opportunities to engage. So in a Zoom session, saying, I welcome, people using the chat and people unmuting themselves and sharing things. Anything, those icebreaker types activities that you could do or you might have done in different things. So, what are you struggling with right now? What are your challenges? What do you want to show us? What are you cooking right now? I had a class, I teach a lot of developmental courses. And so I had some of my students this first week that they were just sort of showing me around, and here's my child and here's my dog. And when we can connect, oh, I have a dog that's just like that. And how old's your child? Mine's 2. So when we give people those opportunities to share a little bit about themselves, I think that that's a great opportunity to invite that engagement. But one of the other things that I know, especially when we're working with caregivers of young children, is time is precious. So the idea that we can work both in this synchronous aspect, so while we're engaged in a Zoom session, a library session, etc., but then also if we can build in some of those asynchronous opportunities. So people that use social media that can be part of different groups, places where you might be able to post a question, and when someone else gets a little bit of time, they can go back and they can respond to that. I have also found that those are great ways in order to encourage engagement with one another. Is, once again, we know that we're all busy and we work on different time schedules. So the idea, there's a central place where we all know we can get that support, even though mine might be at 3 a.m. when I'm up nursing the baby, and yours might be at 8 p.m. when you get the kids down for bed. But the fact that we know it's a place where we can connect with each other. So those are a couple of suggestions I would offer.
Thank you, that's helpful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again so much, Dr. Mudrick. Did Anne-Marie, Debbie, do you have any other questions that you wanted to ask?
I know that you gave your contact information and invited attendees to contact you later. Was that the same for anybody who would watch the video at a later date?
Yeah, absolutely. I would welcome that. As I said, I know time is precious with caregivers, so some of them might be watching this a little bit later. I encourage you to reach out to me as well. I'm happy to answer any of those questions. And one thing I will plug is that in some of my developmental courses this semester, starting in April, we're going to be doing some family fairs. And what I mean by that is we are inviting parents and caregivers and anyone else that has a stake in children's development to hear some of the great things that my students are doing, some of these topics that we know are timely and parents want some information on. So if anyone is all interested in being invited to some of those Zoom sessions, you can certainly reach out to me at my contact information, email me, and I will certainly be in touch with you as we get closer to our end of the semester, which happens to be April.
Great, thank you so much. There are no other questions. I think we can go ahead and end the program for the evening. I just want to thank you again, Dr. Mudrick. I really enjoyed this presentation. I'm sure other folks watching back later will really enjoy it as well. Thank you so much for your time and your knowledge and being here with us today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Emily. And I look forward to connecting with everyone moving forward.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.